Hey all, good job getting Unit 2 finished. I noticed a significant improvement in the project this time around. Before we get this review video started, I'd like to get some housekeeping taken care of. First, you have an exam on Wednesday. There's only one day to take the exam, so plan on some time for that. Don't procrastinate because this is not a situation where I will accept late work. Second, I've noticed that relatively few people are taking advantage of the extra credit. I'd recommend doing it because I don't curve the grade at the end of the term. So if you get 700 out of 1,000 points, it doesn't matter if the top grade in the class is 1,000 or 701, you're going to get a C-. So get as many points as you can while you can. I also wanted to remind you that if you don't get all the participation questions right, then you lose the 10 participation points for that unit. I also wanted to mention that I have noticed quite a few spelling and grammar errors in your submissions. I would recommend installing the Grammarly application into Word. It's free, so it's not going to cost you anything. And this tool will allow you to pick up on some of the errors that Word misses. I'd also like to highlight that quite a few of you are including incomplete sentences in your analyses. All these errors can be fixed with relatively little effort on your part just by reading through your submission once before turning it in. Okay, before we get into the project, let's discuss a few principles briefly. First, let's talk about inflation. Inflation represents an increase in the amount of money it will take to make your purchases. You all remember older people in your life saying they used to be able to get a candy bar for some amount of money that's ridiculously lower than the price today. I can remember when I could buy a 20-ounce soda for $1 in high school, or a Twix candy bar for 59 cents. Well, how much would it cost me today? I've checked, it's about $1.50 for my Dr. Pepper and $1.39 for my Twix. This is an example of inflation. The inflation rate tells me essentially how my ability to purchase goods changes if the dollars I have to spend stays the same over time. If I make $100,000 in the year 2000, that would go a lot farther than the same amount today. So how does inflation impact investing? Well, if I stuff my savings in a mattress, is my purchasing power increasing or decreasing? If there's any inflation, then my purchasing power has decreased. If the inflation rate is higher than what I'm getting paid in interest in a savings account, then I'm losing purchasing power. This is one of the reasons to take on risk when investing, because if I'm not investing my money with returns higher than the inflation rate, then as a result, I'm losing purchasing power. Another thing I noticed was that some of you are still recommending investment vehicles. I want you guys to understand that if I make the recommendation that you invest in mutual funds, 401ks, IRAs, or Roth IRAs, I'm not telling you to invest in anything particular. I'm actually telling you where you should hold your assets. It's like if someone asked me which brand of car they should buy and my answer was that they should buy a truck. Or if you asked me how you should study for your upcoming exam and I said reading. Well, reading is a way that you could study, but it's a whole lot more helpful if I tell you what you should be studying than how you should be studying. Alright, let's go ahead and get to the answers for the Unit 2 project. The scenario puts you at lunch with some friends who are asking you about their individual investing strategies. First there's Nancy, who puts all her savings in her mattress. My description of Nancy's investing strategy might sound something like this. Nancy's investment strategy has very low investment risk because there is very little chance that the United States' currency will lose value, but it is also very low return because there is very little chance that it will grow in value either. So this is an extremely conservative investment strategy. One advantage to this strategy is she will not be hurt by a market crash or recession. One disadvantage of this strategy is she's missing out on our current market expansion and is losing purchasing power because of inflation. Something you also might mention is if something happens to her home like a fire or burglary, she could lose all her cash. Next we have Nick, who puts most of his money in his savings account, which is guaranteed by the FDIC at a commercial bank. He also invests a small portion in long-term government bonds. I would describe Nick's investment strategy as being extremely conservative, similar to Nancy's, because interest rates are so low that he is only slightly better off than her. In fact, I would be extremely surprised if he were getting interest rates that were higher than inflation. He is slightly better off than her in that he is investing in government bonds, but because they are long-term, they could be considered risky. If interest rates rise, as they have recently, then the value of those bonds decreases significantly. So one disadvantage of his investment strategy is not keeping up with inflation while being exposed to interest rate risk. One advantage of his investment strategy is he is protecting a large portion of his investment assets from a market downturn and is safer than keeping it in his mattress. Third, we have Nadia, who invests all her money in technology and electronic equipment stocks. I would describe Nadia's investment strategy as being extremely aggressive. While there is potential for large returns, there is also potential for large losses in such a portfolio. Nadia is increasing the risk by holding individual company stocks, which limits the positive effects of diversification. Diversification limits the chance of catastrophic loss, because there's a lower chance of all technology companies losing money than just one or two. This lack of diversification is a disadvantage, while the potential advantage is her potentially large returns. Finally, we have Nerlens, who invests his money in stock index mutual funds and bond mutual funds. I would describe Nerlens' investment strategy as balanced. By holding mutual funds for bonds and stocks, he is not only diversified within asset classes, bonds and stocks, but across asset classes. This advantage helps to protect him or limit his risk of catastrophic loss. It is not a complete elimination of risk, but it would allow him to get some returns well above inflation, protecting his purchasing power and growing his principal. A disadvantage of proper diversification is that you limit the chance of having huge returns. A single stock is more likely to have astronomical gains than a mutual fund, but it's also more likely to have huge losses too. Well, that's all I have for today. Study hard for your upcoming exam, and I'll see you again after Unit 3.